going on? Welcome back to the channel. You're watching Unbiased Magic Reviews, the magic review channel that you can trust because I have no affiliations with magic companies. No one is sending me this material. I have no disclosure. So you guys know that everything I tell you is my opinion from my experiences. And today I've got a requested mentalism review for you guys. I'm taking a look at Marc Paul's Masterclass lecture. You can still pick this up from Vanishing Ink Magic for $75. You will get a 5-hour lecture that is broken up over 3 days, where Marc Paul goes over 3 main routines, and then he also does a 2-hour question and answer session, which is also combined in there. That's the 3rd day. Now, I'm going to try to give you guys a good breakdown of what you can expect, and along the way, I will do comparisons with some other lectures that Marc Paul has given. That way it will give you a good idea whether or not you want to waste your time and money on this, or if you want to pick up a different lecture from him, which may be a lot more valuable to you. That's why you watch this channel. Now, if you're not familiar with Marc Paul, he's a very famous mentalist from the United Kingdom. He's a corporate mentalist. He's worked on cruise ships for years. He states that he doesn't do strolling mentalism, although a lot of what he teaches can be done in a strolling environment. So let's get started with day 1, and that's going to start out with his handling of Animan's Telepathy Plus. Now, if you're not familiar with Telepathy Plus, you can find it in Animan's One-Man Mental and Psychic Act, which I think you could still pick up from library.com. I will leave here some information below about that. The routine is a mind-reading routine for 3 spectators. I'm going to give you a rundown of it if you're not familiar with it. You're going to give 3 billets out to 3 people. The first person, Animan would have them think of something that had a number, like a serial number or an address. The second person, he would have them think of a question that's on their mind, or maybe think of a person that's important to them. And the third person, he would have them make a drawing. The billets were collected in a cup. I think he said like a coffee cup. And then the mentalist would take out each billet, reveal their impression, open it up and take a look at it, and then immediately hand it out to each person, except the third person, instead of doing it that way, they would give them a slate, and the mentalist would have a slate, and each person in real time would make a drawing, and they would reveal that they match. Now, that design of the last reveal being a drawing is very popular in mentalism, and you've probably seen other mentalists do it, like Bob Cassidy. So Marc Paul has taken that basic routine, which involved a number of billet switches, and has tried to adapt it for a stage. Now here you're going to learn a stage version, which it appears that the mentalist never opens up the spectator's slip, because he felt that there was kind of like a weakness of the mentalist opening up the slip to confirm their impression and then hand it out to the spectator. And so he's done what he can to get around that. So that's the handling you're going to learn here. And for those that are interested, if you do pick up the Alakazam Acts of Mentalism, he actually goes over 3 versions of this exact routine there. So you will learn this routine, but 3 versions of it on the Acts of Mentalism. So you may want to pick that up if you're interested in that. And you'll actually get an entire course on billets there on the Acts of Mentalism, because here what Marc Paul really focuses on is he first focuses on his refinements of the Animan switch. And I think they're good. He goes over some good tips that will help you if you're struggling with the Animan switch, and he even teaches what he calls really the crease switch, which is like a modified Animan switch. And I think it's a good switch. So for those people that are interested in that, if you're into billet mentalism, you may like that. But as I said before, you will get much more information about billets on his Alakazam project, on the Alakazam lecture, compared to this one, because this is really focused on this one routine. Now, that being said, there's a number of things about this handling of this routine that I didn't like. I didn't like how he marked the billets, and I really didn't like how he turns his back on the spectators in the beginning of the routine, because in the beginning of the routine, he hands out the 3 billets, and then they're collected, and he has somebody come up to mix them up. And while they're mixing them up, he turns his back. And so for me, that's really suspect. I mean, maybe on stage that will work. I perform more in a parlor setting where I have 5 to 10 people around me. There's no way that that would work, because I need to get information right under the nose of the spectators in a more elusive way than what he's presenting there. So for me, it just didn't work, but for you, that might work out for you. That really was, for me, the biggest weakness of this. And it's the idea is to try to get around this idea that you have to open up their billet to confirm your impression and then hand it out to them. Because in the handling that he teaches here, as soon as you pick up their billet, you'll pick up their billet and just say, okay, I think this is your billet, and immediately hand it out to them and then reveal the information. That's the handling that he's presenting here. And the trade-off is that you're going to have to do some other things, like, you're going to have to get the information in a slightly different way than what is traditional. Now, I will tell you guys, because I performed a lot of close-up billet mentalism, and in my experiences, when you write down something, you say, I'm going to write down what I'm getting here, and you put it, and you haven't revealed it, you wrote down your impression, you pick up their billet, and you open it up to say, oh yeah, lion, awesome, hey, check out what I wrote. To the spectator, it feels like you're interested to see if you're right, if you can really read their mind. That's really what the spectator is going to feel. They're not going to feel that you're trying to get more information. They're actually going to get a sense that you're really curious to see if you really could read their mind. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the structure that Animan has in the original routine, and applying these principles to close-up mentalism when I've done just billet work one-on-one with people or with two spectators. No one ever questions it. So I think you don't need to run if you're not being chased. Again, though, I think if you're into stage mentalism, you may very well like this routine. So that really is the first routine that he goes over, and the structure is basically the same as Animan's routine, where the first person, he says, I think this is yours, hands it to them, reveals it. He reveals it like on a pad. And then the second person, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to take it and reveal it. And then the last person, it's going to be, again, another drawing. He has them make something that's a little bit more complicated. And so that is the Telepathy Plus. But again, like I told you guys, if you're interested in this routine, you may want to check out the Alakazam Acts of Mentalism, because he goes into more detail there. The second effect that he goes over on the first day is his effect called Affected by Burglars. And this effect is about 16 years old. I was curious why he decided to include this here. This was based on a Ralph Hull effect. And it's a two-phase routine where you can perform it for multiple spectators. In the first phase, one or two people are going to think of a card from a spread, and then they name their card, and there's a series of different outs involved. So their card might rise to the top. It might be a prediction written on the back of the card box. It might be underneath the mat. So there's a series of outs. You have to memorize 10 different outs. I was never a fan of that. I really never liked that. And then the second phase, which is why it's called Affected by Burglars, is the card at any number effect. It's not an any card, because remember, the spectator is not freely thinking of any card. They're thinking of a card that they saw in the spread. So it's really like a selected card at any number effect. And Marc Paul, he states that he's very proud of it, because 1 out of every 10 times you won't have to touch the deck. They can deal to their number face down. They cannot deal face up. They have to deal face down to their number. But the other 9 times, you're going to have to do an open displacement. So as you guys can imagine, for me, that just nixes it, because when you're openly displacing cards, that ruins any kind of any number effect, because it looks like you're moving cards. So that doesn't look magical to me at all. My advice would be to just totally avoid this. Why? Heavy memory work, open displacement, deck can't be examined. It's a terrible effect, so you should just avoid it. I'm really surprised he even included it on this masterclass lecture. So day 2, Marc Paul goes over his blindfold Q&A act, which is a stage effect, and he divulges everything. I think maybe he spent way too much time on that, because he spends a whole hour and a half. I mean, he goes over all the fine details, but I think he could have condensed that in about 45 minutes or even a half an hour, because he really spent a lot of time going over very minuscule details that I I think really aren't that important. But what he does go over that's really good is the method, which is very simple and straightforward. He also goes over an idea of how he does like almost like a real-time dual reality, where he can reveal more than what it just seems like he's revealing to the spectator. So the audience is going to feel like you're revealing much more information than what you were given. He does also talk about how he uses Animan's The Mystery of the Blackboard in the beginning of the effect. And instead of actually going over that, what he could have just said was, he could have said like, oh, I use The Mystery of the Blackboard and you can find it in Animan's Practical Mental Effects. Why? Because this book is freely available online everywhere. If you just Google it, the text will come up and you can just read it. So it's hilarious. Like, why spend time going over that when you can just point somebody and just say, just look it up, you know, because it's so straightforward and simple. Or just explain it in literally 2 minutes, because it's really that straightforward and simple of an effect. That being said, though, I think that it was great that he actually went over actual examples from his own shows. I thought that that was very helpful and that was very useful. And I just thought that this was the best effect that he goes over. But again, if you're not into stage mentalism, then this may not really be that useful to you, although you could do it in a parlor setting. The third day is the question and answer session, which is about 2 hours long. And I'm just going to touch on a few of the questions and the answers that I think you would be interested in. One of the first ones that they ask Marc Paul is what peak wallet he prefers. And he mentions, in his own words, he says he's not a social performer, but eventually he does say that he likes the Jaxx wallet. And I think the Jaxx wallet is a good peak wallet because it looks like a normal wallet. For those that are interested, I would recommend to you guys that you seek out a peak wallet where you don't have to reopen the wallet to get the peak, and a peak wallet that you can do more with it than just peak information. So a peak wallet that has like an SUC feature. That's what I would recommend to you guys. Getting back to this, Marc Paul was also asked about, you know, what he performs in a strolling environment, and he's like, oh, I'm not a close-up mentalist. And that's too bad, because there's some really good pieces of close-up mentalism, but they're just not easy to find. You have to dig them out of the literature, you know, those little nuggets of gold. He's asked about how he justifies having people write stuff down. And this question seems to come up a lot. You know, in mentalism, they always ask, well, how do you justify having somebody write something down? And Marc Paul gives a couple of different answers. One of them is he says that he uses Bob Cassidy's line, which was, you know, I'm a mind reader. I just need you to write it down for me to read your mind. Then he also gives another reason where he says it's to impress the thought on your mind, and that way you can't change your mind. And obviously the simple explanation of it's so you don't change your mind. That is a very simple way to do it if you were ever questioned. Now, I perform close-up mentalism constantly, and I very rarely, if ever, get anyone question why they need to write down their thought. People just don't. They just do as they're told. I don't know. I think it's because they're interested to see what you're going to do. When you tell them, let's try something. Think of this. Okay, here, write it down here, right? And even if you give the justification while you're giving them and you say, here, write it down here so you can't change your mind. That's it. No one's going to question anything. Afterwards, they asked him what he thought about impression pads, and he said that he doesn't use them. Unfortunately, because impression pads are really a great tool. And I would urge you guys to check out some of John Riggs' impression pads if you haven't already, because I think they're very useful. There's a number of other questions that they ask Marc Paul, but they're, you know, the usual type of stuff. He does give a lot of his own experiences, especially working on cruise ship, and that's pretty much everything you can expect on that day. So I want to do a quick comparison with the Penguin Live Act, and the reason is because I think many of you will find that that's a lot more valuable and useful to you than this masterclass lecture. The Penguin Live Act is like half the price. It's like $40, and it's 2.5 hours long. You're going to learn 4 routines, and each of these are just bangers. The first routine is perfect for close-up. It is the challenge mind reading effect, and I will tell you that it's worth the price of the Penguin Live Act. Those of you that talk with me all the time know that I call this Old Faithful because I've used it so many times. It is the perfect impromptu mind reading effect that all you have to do is have the envelope with you in your business card. You have somebody think of whatever you want. They write it down on the business card. It's put in the envelope. and they could see that, there's no way you could see anything. It's put in your pocket, and then you read their mind. And so it really is great for close-up mentalism. The second effect is called decisions, and this is a chair test for like 4 or 5 spectators. I think it's 5 spectators if I remember correctly. Great for parlor or stage. It's a very simple effect, but very clever. I think that you guys would like that as well. Then the third effect is called time to get to know you. This is a 2-person effect on the Penguin Live Act, but he also teaches it on the acts of mentalism, but just for 1 person. And it just uses your business cards, and you're going to be predicting the outcome of what 1 person chooses, and the other person, you're going to be reading their mind. They're going to be writing down a piece of information. So it's very cleverly structured, and it's great for close-up mentalism or like in a parlor setting. And then the last routine, which is like the best routine on the Penguin Live Act, is called the Thought Reader. And this is perfect if you need to entertain 5 or 10 people, like in a parlor setting, or even on stage. You can use this. And the reason why it's so strong is because it's like a mini Q&A. You're going to be handing out blank cards to like 5 or 10 people. They're all collected by somebody who's like the judge. They're going to randomly put 2 of them in envelopes, and you're going to reveal the information that's in the envelope before it's taken out and shown to the spectators. So it's got a very clever structure to it, and it's a great effect. So if you're looking for something to entertain a small group of people, then it's just perfect. And so that's why I think the Penguin Live Act is definitely much better than the Masterclass, but that's my opinion. And if you're looking to try to get the most for your money, you probably will want to pick up the Alakazam Acts of Mentalism, because it's like 9 hours long. I think it's like 60 something, maybe $65. But there's so much on there. You're going to get the most for your money there. Anyway, let's take a look at my rating for this Masterclass lecture. And you guys can see here, this is my rating for it. So you can see that the final rating is 3.25 out of 5. So it's still favorable. But I did give it some low scores for like the amount of content and the price of this. I think that this is really way overpriced. I think that your money is better spent picking up one of Marc Paul's other lectures that exist out there. And so as usual, if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them for me below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because it shows me that you are interested in material like this. And if you do give me a thumbs up and leave me comments below, then I know that you want to see more reviews of Masterclass lectures like this. If you don't, then I'll just figure you're not interested. That's all. Anyway, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next review.